Welcome back to the Underdog Soccer Podcast. We got a pretty solid episode tonight, something that we've done a couple times before. Real quick, Matty Knips, Marcus O'Malley, Vince, Chris. How are you guys doing tonight, real quick? I'll just throw it out to all of you to talk at the same time.
Doing good, man.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Doing good, man. Doing good. I'm excited to be back. It's been a while, so yeah, stoked to talk to you guys about the depth chart.
Yeah. Chris, how is it going, man?
Good, man. Same sentiments. Been way too long. Had some other stuff going on, but finally glad to talk some USMNT with 2 new trophies in the cabinet.
And Vince is newly joining us on video. Vince, how are you, man?
Pretty good. Can't complain. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. So this is the 6th edition of our top 5 ranking. What we do is we rank every position, top 5 players, USMNT active pool. And then we actually took all of our 4 votes and made an aggregate version of it. And so it's our aggregate top 5. Couple little rules. We only ranked 1 player per position. So Serginho Dest, for example, is only a right back or only a left back, but not both. I feel like that's the same example that I also use always. Another rule. Do we have any other rules?
I think that's it, man.
Oh, we put all 10 center backs together and we put all 10 wingers together, being that, they more fluidly can go from left to right. So we're going to start at the back. I think we're just ready to go. We're going to go right into it. I'm going to start with goalkeeper. So we're going to start 5. Sean Johnson, he's one of the older keepers in the entire pool. He still has value, but at the same time, with everybody being much younger than him, that's 4-3-2-1. I feel like this is probably going to be the last time that he's in the top 5. Next up, number 4, Chitura Odunze. Young guy, he's already been in a couple camps. I think he's potentially one of the keepers of the future. The kid stands at like 6'7" or something. So he might not be on the next World Cup roster in 2022, but 2026, I feel like he would have a legit shot from the outside, way outside looking in. Our top 3 keepers, I feel like that should be pretty self-explanatory. We all agreed on the 3 for sure. We had different number 4s and 5s, but our 3s are so Matt Turner, then Ethan Horvath, then Zach Steffen. The great thing about all 3 of them is a couple things. So first, they're all 26 or 27. So even in 2026, they'll only be 4 or 5 years older. Another great thing is all 3 of them have recently proven that they are great options for us at keeper. Vince, what do you think?
I just think that it's a huge battle going on. It just seems like they're all aware of it as well, which is what I'm really enjoying seeing. They took that into the national team camps. It seemed like Zach Steffen performed well. Then Ethan Horvath comes off the bench, does really well. Then Matt Turner felt like he had to step up his game in the Gold Cup and has that amazing tournament to put his name in the hat, essentially. But they've both, or all 3 of them anyway, have taken that to their club games as well. Ethan Horvath got his move to Nottingham Forest and played really well in his debut. Zach Steffen played really well in his friendlies for Manchester City, and then into the Community Shield game, played a really good game. Really unlucky not to get the win there. And Matt Turner just continues to basically be the best keeper in MLS. So I think at this point, what we're waiting to see is Matt Turner get a move. We all know he needs it. I think he knows he needs it. Basically, he's going to try to stay with the Revs through the end of the season and try to win MLS Cup. But I think after that, all parties involved, including New England, knows he needs to move on. So that's really the next step for me, is to see who's starting at this camp. I fully expect it to be Zach Steffen, not just because I rate him the highest, and I know that you guys all pretty much rate him the highest, but I think he's just Greg Berhalter's guy. So I think he's going to get first crack at it no matter what. Where the 2 and 3 come behind him is going to be the most interesting thing to me. So if Zach picks up an injury, like we all know he's had knee issues and things like that. If he picks up an injury, I'm just wondering who's first off the bench, because I don't know the answer to that in Berhalter's mind. I have it in my mind, but I don't know what Berhalter's thinking. And the only other differentiator at this point is to see who's performing the best in Europe, first and foremost. So once Matt gets over there, to see what club he goes to, what a situation is, and if he's starting regularly, because that'll be a differentiator for him, while the other two are kind of the number twos for their respective clubs.
Marcus, what you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree everything, that both of you all said. I think for me, in game, coming off the bench, I don't think after what Horvath did that you could go differently. But I think if it was a known injury coming in, it's, I don't get upset hearing any of those three names in the back between the pipes. Like they all have flaws. There's all, you can question Turner, as far as challenge and what he's doing day in and day out, but you could say that about all three of them now, even with Horvath. I'm glad he got a move. I'm glad he's starting, but I don't know that was the right move, to really put him in the best position to really feel good about his future right now. I think he's right, in the melting pot with the other two. Like I kind of feel like it's a wash. I don't get too upset about any of them.
So Chris, in the Gold Cup, Berhalter only used Matt Turner. So we start World Cup qualifying. Do you think that if whoever he picks for number one, let's say it's Zach Steffen, does he strictly go with Zach Steffen for all three of those first games in September? Or do you think he's going to use more than one keeper?
I do think that could be situational depending on how the games go. But I mean, it is pretty common thought that keepers with the one position that there's not a lot of wear and tear as the game goes on, unless like there's a lot of crazy things that happen. Like I said, that's the one position where you can have 2 or 3 games in like a week's time and not truly feel it. So I feel like it's possible that he could use the same keeper, but it's also would be nice to like pad the score against one, hopefully like El Salvador, we have a really good game, let's just say, and then we can give one of the other two guys a run out. When it comes to like the environment, I personally give Horvath the nod as I think he should be our starting keeper, because you can't really replicate the pressure environment that he came into in that Mexico game and was able to perform ice cold off the bench. He did everything you wanted to see it from a keeper. The crazy shot stopping, like the long shots, stopping a penalty. He was great with his feet. And for me, he's the number one. But I feel like like you guys, all three of you guys were saying, it is really close. And I do think that Berhalter will probably use the same keeper for all three, just for consistency. Mm-hmm. But I could also see just switching in somebody if the situation arises. Like say even we have a big half, and he could switch keepers then, just to give somebody a quick time.
Yeah. All right. Any other keeper stuff, guys, before we move on to the next position? All right, let's do it. Left back. Chris.
All right. So, yep. For our combined top 5 left backs, we have from 5 to 1. We'll go your guy Marcus Jogo, and then Scally, then George Bello, then Sam Vines, and number 1 Anthony Robinson. So Matty, what do you think about this list?
I think it's pretty wild to see like how quickly Joe Scally has jumped on here. If we would have made this podcast a week ago, 2 weeks ago, like would he even have been in the top 5? It's crazy. Like me and Marcus were talking a few minutes ago about how like I couldn't believe that he like went to Mönchengladbach and started. Like we didn't think that he was going to go right away and just fit right into the game 1 against Munich. So I think that's really awesome, because left back has been the position of need for quite a few years, since DeMarcus Beasley. So we've gone through a lot of guys. A lot of us are confident in Anthony Robinson, including myself, but we need to grow the depth. So I like it though. I'm glad that he's inserted himself into the mix, basically. What do you guys think, Marcus?
I mean, I get to watch Jogo every week. The dude is an artist on the field. I mean, every week he's adding to his arsenal. Like I'm extremely overselling him and not afraid that he's not going to back it up, man. Like he's legitimately a really good player. It's fun to watch him here. Scally was a surprise. I'm excited. I don't know if he'll keep his spot. I think the starter just got back from injury. but he turned up, against Bayern Munich. It was no joke. So hopefully he's going to crack in. I haven't had a chance to see him play, but I've heard Bello has just been killing it since getting back. Vines, I guess, had a rough day today, but first game, he's moved to Europe. He's challenged himself. I'm excited for that, and I'm a Robinson fan. Like I know he's flawed, but I like him. I'm very excited about where left back is headed. Not that we're there yet, but this is the most excited I've been about left back. You kind of cringed for several years and like, who's he going to stick back there? It's like spin a wheel. It's not going to be good no matter who it is. I'm genuinely excited about where it's headed.
Are we going to hear an announcement from Jogo in a couple weeks?
I believe so. Yeah, I think his birthday is in 2 weeks. So hoping we'll hear an announcement. I don't know if he'll announce or they'll wait till January window and whenever the actual official stuff happens.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Vince, what are your thoughts on those?
I was about to call us out for exactly what you just said, Matty, about Scally. Like, what are we doing? The guy's played one competitive game, 2 competitive games for his club, and he's already on the depth chart. And then I looked at it and I was like, actually, our combined order is exactly how I had it. So I'm basically calling out myself. So, and it's really a reflection on the fact that we have 3 guys at left back right now that I think that any of us would feel comfortable with. I mean, obviously Serginho we're putting as a right back in this exercise. So theoretically we have 4 guys that can play that position and that we would feel comfortable with after both of these tournaments over the summer. And after that, there's a huge drop off. Like it's just prospects. We're guessing at this point. So you see somebody perform well against Bayern and instantly they're on it. They're on the depth chart. But the ironic thing is that we're saying, we have to have these guys in their natural positions. We're not, double positioning. And Scally's a right back. He's not a left back.
Yeah.
But that's just how deep the right back position is. Where it's like, I'm going to cheat a little bit and take this right back and just put in a left back because we need a left back and we don't need a right back. And it is what it is. And I think it was really nice to see him play out of position as well as he did against Leroy Sané. And that was it was great. It was great to watch. As for Jogo, like you guys said, I mean, he's going to get a move in the next few weeks. I'm really excited to see that. I haven't seen him as much as Marcus has, but the times that I have seen him, I've been very impressed. And the top 3 guys, kind of speak for themselves. Anthony Robinson is a Premier League player. Every single time he plays in the Championship, he looks like he's just completely over that level. He performed very well. I think statistically speaking, with all the advanced metrics, he was a top 5 to 10 left back in the Premier League last year. He belongs in the Premier League. I wish that he would have gotten a move this summer, and I'm not sure if there's anything on the cards with him over the next few weeks. As for Vines, like you said, he's testing himself. Rough day in his first outing, but I don't really put a ton of stock into that. I think he's fine as a backup left back. I think that's his ceiling anyways. I don't see him as like a Scally or Brian Reynolds type where I think that he's gonna drastically improve. I just want to make sure that he's testing himself at the highest level on a week-to-week basis. So going to Belgium was a really good fit for him, especially the size club in Belgium that he's at. It's not like he's at St. Truden like Chris Durkin is. That would be a little bit different in my eyes. But Royal Antwerp is a very good club. They're playing in Europa League, so good for him. And George Bello, I'm higher on ultimately from a potential standpoint than I am Vine. So I think at some point Bello is going to be, number 2. I just don't think he's quite there in my mind, just fundamentally. So we'll kind of see. We'll see how that goes over the next year or 2. I think Bello will also get a move to Europe and probably push to higher levels than Vines will.
One last thing about left backs, and we'll maybe talk about this more later, but is in a 23-man roster situation, Berhalter potentially will only bring 3 outside backs. And so if he only brings 3, obviously one is Serginho Dest. And then who are the other 2 going to be? Hopefully they're guys like Serginho that can at least proficiently play on both sides of the field. And so that benefits Scally, benefits Moore. So who will those 3 guys be anyway? All right, go on to center backs, man.
All right. So for center backs, our combined list. I'm going to go from 10. Again, we're going on 10 on this one just because we are taking both of the center backs spots and combining them so that it's not sorted in left and right center back. So we're going to go start at 10. Tim Ream. Tim Ream is at 10 and falling fast, in my opinion. I think that there's some guys that didn't make the list this time around that probably will next time, specifically Justin Che. So I don't really anticipate Ream to be on this list for much longer, to be honest. And I think that most people are going to say he shouldn't be one of the top 4 or 5 center backs that we bring from this point forward. I'm not positive what his future is. I don't really think that there's a reason to kind of bring him anymore. But I think Berhalter sees him as that veteran presence. And the opposite of what we just said about Anthony Robinson applies to Tim Ream. He is a championship player. He is like amazing in the championship. He basically regularly churns out amazing like scores on any type of scoring app when he plays in the championship. He's regularly like 6.7 and above is like his baseline performance in the championship. And every single time he goes to the Premier League, he falls off the face of the earth. So I think that's just his level. He's older. He's slow. He can't play left back despite what Berhalter consistently tries to do. And I just don't really see a reason to take him anymore. I think we have enough veteran leadership on this team. So Tim Ream falls at 10. CCV needs a move. I think we all know that. I heard today that Bournemouth was no longer interested and withdrew their offer. So probably Newcastle, I think, is the only one that has a bid on for him. That would actually be a good move because they're a Premier League club. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Walker Zimmerman, reigning MLS Defender of the Year. Having him at what is that, 8, kind of speaks to some of the depth that we have here. I mean, like, again, reigning MLS Defender of the Year, that's a good problem to have. And I think that every single time that Walker's played, specifically in the Gold Cup before he got hurt, I thought he was doing well. And he was doing things that I didn't really attribute to his skill set as much, meaning he was advancing the ball forward. He's one of the very few people that were advancing the ball forward in those first 2 games. So I was glad to see that until he got injured. James Sands is number, 7? Interesting player to me because I kind of think that he's actually a 6, but we're playing him as a center back. He gives us that ability to play 3 at the back because he kind of can step into the midfield in possession. So he just kind of creates this interesting wrinkle that maybe he's 7th on this depth chart as we have him, but Berhalter might bring him just because he wants to play 3 center backs in one game. So something to watch there. Also something to watch with him is I don't expect for him to be at New York City for much longer. I think he's going to be in Europe. EPB we have at 6. Interesting because he is not. We all rated him on our respective rosters, but he has not really been in any of these camps. I think he went to one of the European camps and he didn't play, if I'm remembering right. So I'm not positive if Berhalter rates him as high as we do, but I think it's unfair to the kid, and I hope he gets a permanent move soon from Manchester City. I think that ultimately hurts him. Similarly to the next guy on our list, which is Matt Miazga. Looks like he's going to be playing in La Liga this year. Super excited about him playing there. I think what was the club that he was going to be going to? It was Alaves, right? Yeah. So it's a good situation for him there. I watched a little bit of La Liga. They're a pretty defensive team, so he'd be relied upon. And I think that ultimately it's going to be really interesting to see what he does in a top 5 league for the first time since he was at Nantes in Liga. So that's going to be a good challenge for him. Then we've got Miles Robinson, the story of the Gold Cup. As we all know, I think Miles Robinson is also too good for MLS at this point, and he's at that age where it's like it's time to move now, or you're not going to get a chance. We saw the same. Yeah, we saw the exact same thing with Walker when he was after his like first or second year at LAFC. It's like he's going to move. He needs to move now, otherwise he's going to get stuck in MLS for his career. And not to say that's a bad thing. I'm an MLS guy, but like, yeah, if we want our best players playing in Europe, and we do, he needs to move if he wants to kind of stay on top of the list. Then we've got Mark Mckenzie at number 3, Chris Richards at number 2. I'm putting those 2 guys together because I see them as a pretty similar situation, both high ceiling, both young, both testing themselves at European clubs, and ultimately kind of have this, situation where it's like, are they going to become out and out day after day starters for their European clubs. That's their club situation that we're watching for. Chris might get a move to Hoffenheim, or I know that he was rumored to Leicester, but I think they got another center back. But we'll see what happens with Chris. But Mark needs to just basically focus on his club situation at Genk, and just nail down that out and out starter on a day-to-day basis, because I think he's good enough, and that's what, that's his goal from a club perspective. From a national team perspective, it's basically who pairs best with the number one guy, which is unanimous, John Brooks. John Brooks is an interesting situation because he is exactly the player that he has always been. He's a big guy. He's great in the air. He plays the ball well with his left foot, and is a little bit slow. So ultimately what you kind of need next to him is somebody that's fast and can kind of clean up from some of the action when he steps into midfield to play balls in possession. So Miles Robinson fits that kind of category. I'm interested to see if some of the two higher ceiling guys like Chris Richards or Mark Mckenzie can do the same things. That's something that I'm watching from just a pairing standpoint.
Vince, I'm curious, Mark making a couple errors in the final, a lot of people down on him, Chris being hurt, Chris Richards not playing in either of these games. I thought Sands had some shaky moments. Like how close do you think this group is, with those, did those little moments hurt you, or do you think Greg's kind of seeing the big picture and kind of has his guys at this point?
I think Greg sees it exactly how the rest of USMNT Twitter sees it at this point. It's like 2 through 6. I mean, just take your pick.
Yeah.
It's gonna come down to who pairs well with Brooks. It's as simple as that. Brooks is the starter, so who pairs well with him? And I think that's what the center backs kind of need to be focused on. Miles Robinson gave himself a really good case in the Gold Cup, and I think that people are kind of overlooking that, and I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him starting in World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, and just one little note while we're talking about it, we didn't include a couple guys because they were injured. Aaron Long was one of them. Also Jordan Morris and Richie Ledesma. So yeah, interesting to think, like you were just mentioning those guys 2 through 6, like which one is it? Aaron Long would have fallen into that category, at least for me, had he not been injured. Chris, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, and with the particular thing with this position too, I feel like is that with these camps coming up with 3 games, and we know that the rosters are going to be bigger, where does Berhalter put the extra player? Does he bring an extra forward? Does he bring an extra center back? Does he bring an extra outside back? We don't know what his mindset is yet, depending on the formations that he's going to use, and we don't know what's going on in that respect. And another thing is too, I feel like there was a lot of camaraderie that was built on top of these past, like obviously the beautiful summer that we've had, and you wonder, does Tim Ream, does he play a part of that? Or is someone going to be able to kick him out of this potential group? You saw that Nations League roster, which is going to be our quote unquote our A guys. Is someone going to be able to pop up, like you were saying, Vince, and kind of just like cement themselves in there? I agree with you. What you're saying is we got to find who's going to be best next to Brooks, but we also need to figure out if we're going to use that 3 center back formation. We got to figure out who's going to be able to do that. And the thing is, I know that Chris can definitely do that because he's shown it at Hoffenheim right away. Goes into the first day when he was on loan. Starts as left center back. I don't know if you can get any more versatile than him. But we all know that Berhalter is going to put a precedent on playing time, and not playing a second for Bayern is not helping his cause. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah. One of the questions that I wrote for later was who will be on the first World Cup roster that will surprise everyone. And I wrote that question with Tim Ream in mind. Like, he didn't belong on the Nations League roster, but I really think part of, and maybe most of the reason why he was on there was because of the leadership and the experience quality that he had, and that kind of coaching ability from the field level sideline closer to. So that's who I was thinking of about that.
It's interesting because
there's
on your point on Aaron Long, it's exactly why I say it's ultimately going to be who pairs well with Brooks, there's a reason why, like, Aaron Long is not a high ceiling guy. He's not the greatest defender in the world. He is an MLS guy. Like he was rumored for West Ham for a little bit, but like, I don't really see him as a premiership like level player. But he is basically the guy as a second center back because of the style of play that he has. He just pairs well with Brooks in defense. So like, if a guy with a higher ceiling, like like Chris was just saying, if Chris Richards can basically play that role, it's his. The role is his, because it's you don't have anybody else that's basically been able to step up, say, I can play well and complement Brooks' style. And by the way, I'm 20, 21 years old and have a really high ceiling and I'm playing in the Bundesliga. So like, you kind of have all these different players that are either young, still developing, have warts, like all these different things. And it's just Berhalter's decision is going to be basically be down to who pairs well with the one guy I know I have to play. So it's just going to be really interesting to watch over the next few months. And I don't think it's going to be whoever's rolled out for day one on World Cup qualifiers. I think any of these guys, literally 2 through 10, and maybe 2 through 11 if we count Justin Che, or 2 through 12 if we count Aaron Long, can be on the World Cup roster next year. So it's just going to be really interesting to see how the evolution of this position takes.
Yeah. Marcus, one last question before you take the right backs is, if we play with 3 center backs, who are they?
I go Brooks, Mckenzie, Richards. I think Mckenzie's two-footedness. I thought he actually paired well with Brooks. I mean, he had errors offensively at the two errant passes. I don't think the handball was a handball personally, there at the end. I watched that game a couple times. I thought he played very well defensively. I think he's a smart player, great passer of the ball, offers a lot going forward, which takes some of the pressure off of Brooks, and then athletically, provides a lot of coverage. So I like him. And I've just been a big fan of Chris Richards from day one. I think he's just very athletic. He's got size. He's played right back. He's played, left and right center back. I think he even played left back in one game, in a youth game. Like, he's a versatile, super physical. That would be my 3. Miles Robinson, that was the first time I'd seen him. I thought he was super calm on the ball. I wouldn't be upset to see him at any of those spots. I'm just not as familiar with him. I haven't really watched a lot of Atlanta, and that was my first time getting a look at him. I was really impressed. I thought he was solid.
Do any of you guys know who's taller, Chris Richards or Miles Robinson?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like it has to be Chris, but I don't know offhand.
They're both about like 6'1", 6'2", right?
I know they're both pretty big guys, but I was just curious because, I mean, if whoever the taller one is just next to Brooks, and then if we're going to score on corners, man, that's 2 huge weapons.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So Chris Richards is 6'2", Miles Robinson is 6'2", so they're the same size as according to Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, and you guys know Wikipedia is airtight. I believe it.
It knows all. Yeah.
They're both pretty young too. They might have an inch left.
Sure. Yeah.
Imagine that.
It's crazy. All right. Right backs.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Before I jump in, I do want to give a shout. I did hear, many of you probably know that Arajo was talking about switching to Mexico. Greg successfully asked him to hold off from filling out the papers till they met in person. I did hear that they have met in person and that it went well. TBD what that is, but big props to Greg for stepping up. Not just kind of letting go and shrugging. Putting in a fight. I think that shows a lot to his players and shows a lot, hopefully, to dual nationals. So, little shout to Arajo. He did not make our list. I actually pulled him because I thought, he was gone. But I think he's right there on the edge of this list. And so, jumping in at 5, we got Brian Reynolds at Roma, playing in Series I. I think he surprised a lot of people with his move from FC Dallas. We were talking a little bit before the pod. Youngest ever American to start in Series A. Last April was his first start, so very exciting there. Mourinho is the new manager at Roma, so we'll see, what happens there, what opportunities he'll get, but, great experience and excited to see a youngster over in Europe. Next, we got number 4, Reggie Cannon, well-known name on this pod. A lot of U.S. fans have been seeing him for the last couple of years, came screaming on the scene at the 2019 Gold Cup. Back-to-back finals against Mexico. He's played well. We'll see what happens this summer with his club situation. Sounded like Boavista was going to lock him in, but there's a lot of rumbling that he might be headed. Where there was rumor recently, right, that somebody else had their eyes on him.
That was that was Busio on the bus on the way home.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I forget what the team was, but
Nice. Busio was saying Nice.
Okay.
But the latest rumor I had a couple championship clubs, incling Nottingham Forest. So
Nottingham Forest was the one. That's it.
Yep.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yeah. We had number 3, Shaq Moore. A lot of talk about him over the years from U.S. fans. A lot of people considered him the best crosser of the ball in the pool. Had himself, in my opinion, one of the better Gold Cups, as far as stock goes. Really made a name for himself. Looked good two-way. Comes in, performs well against Mexico. Two-way, scores the big goal against Canada. Wins the game for us. Huge. I think he played 42 matches last season. So just durability. In an athletic player, that's come screaming up the wing, again, back to kind of Arajo, I called him out earlier, he turned down this camp and Shaq made the most of it. He stepped up, he stepped in. So I'm very excited about him just having that other option in the pool. So he was 3. Number 2, my guy, Deandre Edlin. I think it was last winter, you guys asked me, like, do I think Edlin's done with the national team? And I said, I think he is, because I thought he was going to rot on the Newcastle bench. I didn't think Bruce would play him. And Galatasaray comes in and rescues him. He's 100 Premier League performances, century mark over there, continuing to play on, they just lost to PSV, knocked them out of the hunt for Champions League. But, I was playing on one of the top clubs, in Turkey. I thought, if we're going to bring somebody with World Cup experience, I would take Edlin over a Reem, I would take Edlin over an Areola. Like, I think for me, of the World Cup experienced players, like he's the one that I can think of that I would take with us. And that to me is tremendous value. Like, I think there's still respect for him, regardless of what some fans think about what he can or can't do on the field. I think he's right in the mix. And that World Cup experience could be the bump between, battle between him and Cannon or him and Shaq. And then number 1, Serginho Dest, the coup of coups for dual national conversation. Like anyone that gets upset about us losing dual nationals should just think about Dest, and that should just shut the conversation down. Just incredible player. It's Barcelona. I realize it's not Messi anymore, but look, he's at Barcelona and it's Dest. He's world class. I didn't think he had a great summer. But we know what he's capable of, and he can play at either side, right? He may be our best right back and our best left back all in one. So excited about them. Chris, what do you think, man?
Oh, yeah. It's crazy looking at this list. Dest and Moore. And I think Reynolds maybe played left back a little bit. I could be wrong there, but it's crazy to see 3 names on there that could play on either side. And it's also wild that we have a guy at Roma and he's rated our 5th best right back. It's just awesome to see. I agree with everything you're saying about Dest. He had a really good game for Barca, and as soon as he came off, they let up 2 goals recently. So that shows like how important he is to that team, truly. Same thing with the Edlin, man. I know they played today, Galatasaray. They actually had 2 games this week. I don't think he played in the one on Monday, but then he played today for the Europa League. I'm not sure how well he did. I didn't get a chance to look at any highlights or anything like that. But yeah, he's around. Another guy that's a warrior. He's been through a hex before, so it's something that Greg could value. Shaq Moore, man, what a summer. I do think he might be the best crosser of the ball for our fullbacks. Maybe not in the team, but probably their fullbacks. I do agree with he's the best crosser of the ball. So free to get forward and just loves it. And he needed that to get a move. So hopefully that can happen for him. Let's see. What do you think, Vince?
Well, I've actually got a question for you guys. Where does Julian Arajo fit? If we expanded this past 5, we're just so deep at the right back position, to Chris's point. Like our 5th guy is playing at Roma. We're so deep in this position, and we might take 2, right? Like, you can't take all these guys. Where does Julian Arajo fit if we expanded this out? Like, is he 6th? Is he 7th? Is he 8th? What is he in your mind?
I had him at 5. I think I put him a little ahead of Reynolds until Reynolds is a regular start, until he's like broken in. Like right now, I think he's a very raw talent. I think Arajo is a little more developed. I think he's a better defender than most of that list. Maybe Cannon's ahead of him, but from a pure defender perspective, I think he's right there, kind of on that 4, 5, 6 range for me.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I was going to say probably ahead of Reynolds. I don't see anyone else that's not on the list that would be ahead of him, but yeah, I'd lock him in at 5-ish, 5.
Yeah, Chris, where does he end up for you?
Probably it'd probably be. I did. That's a good point about Reynolds. Like, even though he is a Roma player, he's not like fully established, starting every week, like showing that he's capable of that level in a consistent manner. And Arajo is balling out. I mean, he's playing really well for the Galaxy. So yeah, he's probably in that 5th spot.
I think Edlin. Just a quick thing about Edlin, like Marcus was saying, I mean, I was ready to write him off too. And I think at the Nations League, like he really showed that we need a player with his attitude on the roster. And he's also a great player to sub in. He's not going to be our starter, but he's going to be a great sub to come in the 75th-ish minute and finish off the game. And he's CONCACAF tested for many, many years. So his experience is going to show him great. None of us ranked anyone else besides those 5, by the way. Marcus had Arajo, but then decided to change him due to, what was going on. But I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, and and also we have Scally over on the left back side, so we couldn't use him. So for me, I see Arajo, Scally, and Reynolds pretty similarly in that they're all young. They're all higher ceiling. They probably have some development left to do. 2 of them are playing at big clubs in Europe, and one's playing for the LA Galaxy. So for me, anyways, that ends up putting Arajo behind both of those guys. So Arajo is 7th. And so, like, I have to imagine that basically that's one of the reasons he's looking at this and saying, like, do I have any shot? Like just forget like, if I'm 7th, and I mean, he's probably doesn't think that way, but like he's looking at the competition and thinking there's maybe 2 spots that I'm getting. And at this point, I'm one of 7 to 10 right backs. And we're kind of like all are on the same level from 4 to 7, 4 to 8. So like, I don't know if I would understand if he switched, to be completely honest. I would completely understand that. It's a little bit different from some of the other duels that we're playing, but I just kind of throwing that out there because we're so deep at this position that if somebody switched like him, Alex Roldan recently switched, not to say Alex Roldan had any shot, like literally any shot. And so he made the right decision, but it's going to be an interesting, calculus for Julian Arajo to have.
So somebody asked me, what do you think Greg's pitch was, from that? And I said, look at Reggie Cannon 2 years ago. He was an extra. He only came because of an injury to that Gold Cup, kills it at Mexico. All of a sudden, no question, he's number 1. He's past the screen. Shaq Moore comes to Gold Cup, does the exact same thing. Boom, he's 3. No question. So I would make the case to all those, down to 8, and that was my guess of Greg was like, make your case, state your case. I do give people opportunities, doors open. State your case. Would be my sales pitch to him.
The only thing that would make that sales pitch better is if it wasn't 2 right backs that you were also like talking about. Like if they were other guys, like look what I did for this winger and this center back and this goalkeeper that you don't have to worry about. But now you also have to worry about these 2 guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, if he got a transfer to a top European club, which is very possible,
sure.
from the rumblings that I've heard, I think he could squeeze in.
It just seems like we're developing another right back every 5 seconds in the U.S. right now. So
it's true.
If he switched, I mean, there's going to be another, like Kyle Duncan's having a very good season right now. Like it's not like there aren't some other young guys behind him that could theoretically jump into that mold. But to Marcus's point, basically, other than Serginho, it's not like that second spot is cemented. You could take over. It's not unreasonable to think Brian Reynolds, Joe Scally, Julian Arajo, whoever it is, could take Reggie Cannon's spot, who I think is sort of going to plateau in the next year or two. And
Edlin's
then
28. This is his last run.
Edlin's 28. This is his last run. And then you've got Shaq Moore, who I mean, I don't know how much more development he's got, and I mean, I think he's better than Tenerife in the Segunda division. But
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me to kind of look at that and be like, look, the second right back spot's not taken, but you've got a lot of competition, so you have to embrace that competition. And that kind of goes to something I tweeted a while ago of saying, look, I don't want people that are afraid of competition in this pool. I just don't. It's counter to our culture that we're building. So to Marcus's point, if Greg went in there and said, look, the second spot's not taken, Serginho's going to be on the roster. We know that. But like the second spot's not taken, and it's not impossible that I'd take 3 just in case, because Serginho might be a left back. So like 2 to 3 you could break into. And ultimately, it's up to you to prove to me that you're better than the other 8 guys, but you can't be afraid of that competition.
Yep.
Right.
And that's the kind of player that I want. So if Julian stays with that sales pitch, then that's the player that I'm thinking, okay, like he's up for the challenge. Let's see what he does. Let's see what European move he gets, and he's going to be one on my radar.
Right. I agree with that sentiment. I think as an athlete, you have to be willing to bet on yourself. So that's like something that you definitely want to do. And so you perfectly said it. If he's got to come in there, he's like, all right, this is what I got to. If I have this goal, and this is what I have to do, and I'm gonna do it. So yeah, I agree.
And you can take it almost a step further as Berhalter's pitch, and maybe he didn't say the second spot was open. Maybe he said the first spot is open because I plan on putting Dest over on the left, or we know Dest is going to be on the left at least sometimes. So when Dest is on the left, who's it going to be on the right?
Yeah, really good point.
You want to start with the 6? You want to move on to that?
Yeah, let's get it going.
All right. So starting off with our 5th, we put Owen Otasoe, who is currently at Wolverhampton, but has been linked to Bruges. I believe he was just doing his physical, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
So then moving on to number 4, Gianluca Busio, who is in Venezia. Number 3, Johnny, plays in Brazil.
International.
I totally forgot that for a second. Number 2, Kellen Acosta, which after the Gold Cup, he made a huge case, talking about Miles Robinson, talking about Shaq Moore, talking about Matt Turner. Kellen Acosta had a great tournament. And I think before that, I'll speak for myself and say I wasn't very high on him. I didn't think he really deserved to be close to a roster spot. And now I'm locking him in as my second best 6 in the pool. And, he's on the roster in September. And until one of these other younger guys that I just mentioned previously proves that they're better than him, he's going to be on every roster until that. Number 1, Captain America himself, Tyler Adams. Couldn't be more excited about this guy. I just love watching him play. I think he's an exciting player. I think has the passion that you want to have in your leader. And so I just think he's a really exciting player to have. And I think, because we didn't even have him for most of Nations League.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he come in for like a sub appearance against Mexico in the final, very late?
78th or the 82nd minute, somewhere around there.
Didn't play in the semifinal. So it's like, as great as we played then, just imagine the upgrade of having Tyler Adams there. So I think the 6 is an exciting spot, but, past those first 2 guys, it's kind of a toss up between, we had Johnny at 3, Busio and Otasoe to round out the top 5. So it can kind of, the lower side of it is a little weaker is what I'm saying. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, this was a very interesting list overall because there were some other names that that we all use differently. Like I think I'm looking at our list now. I think we let's see, 3 of us used Busio. Oh no, 2 of us used Busio. Taylor Booth was there. Perea was there. Tanner Tessman. there's a couple different names there. So it was interesting to see. And I took a look at it before the pod, and I was just like, oh man, the sixth pool is kind of growing. Like there's a couple guys in there. Obviously, Busio can play as an 8 and can play as a 10. I think he played a little bit of forward at Sporting KC before he made his move. He's another versatile guy. But it's interesting to see that. An interesting one for me is Tanner Tessman. Because I think if he can burst into Venezia and prove himself in Italy like that, that's going to be a huge way, not only to announce himself onto the USMNT stage, but to take that to the team, because Italy is known as a very like defensive league. And so if he's able to take all the things that he can learn from moving to a club like that and move himself into that position, I think he could burst into here. But moving on to the actual 5 that we have, it was a shame that Johnny had such a bad Olympics. It really did suck. He was one of the guys that he didn't. I don't think he looked terrible. It was kind of like a culmination of all the bad parts coming together and trying to play with. It just didn't look. It looked disjointed. And I don't think he did too terrible. I think he was trying to do too much, and there was a lot that was going on around him. Definitely agree with what you're saying, Matty, about Tyler Adams. He's just he's our guy, man. We would have looked a lot better against Honduras with him shoring up the midfield, putting out fires and just being himself if he was able to do that. Acosta, man, what can you say about this guy? Influential in 2 trophies. Like it's crazy to see how much he's bounced back after Berhalter told him to go home in January of 2019. Like it's crazy to see that his rise and him actually like prove himself and him being the starting 6 against Mexico for a trophy. It's nuts. And then Odusowi can definitely do a lot with his move as well. And Busio along the same lines as Tessman. I feel like he looked great in the Gold Cup, and I feel like as that deep lying 6, that playmaker, he's got a good eye for a pass, and he's also athletic and can put out fires like crazy. And the big thing with him that stuck out for me with the Gold Cup is that he was willing to tackle anytime. He was willing to get stuck in any single time. So that's why I listed him as a 6. And I feel like he could really make his mark there too. Marcus, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just like processing what you said. I think it's good. I think Odusowi, has a huge high potential. I think Johnny, same. I like what you said. It was like it almost felt like he was probably destined for Europe if he'd had a good Olympic qualifying, and it just didn't land it. So it wasn't there. Busio, it was funny in the first couple of games, I was kind of like he's almost too calm on the ball, like he was like too lackadaisical. But I saw that flip of the switch. Like he seemed much more aggressive in the later rounds and kind of under pressure situations, which I really appreciated. Like it's showing that growth and potential there. And then Acosta, I feel like a bad weather fan. It's like when he was playing, I was like not great on him, and then when Berhalter benched him, I was like, what are you doing? He's such a good player. And then he came back and I was like, why is he back? Like, I've been like a bad weather fan, literally as he's kicking the cross in that Gold Cup final. I'm like, man, he's been terrible. Why is he the one taking this free kick? Boom. It's an assist. We win the game, so I don't know what to make of him anymore. I'm kind of lost on Acosta. So I guess I'm going all in now, and saying he's the backup to Adams. But I do think the gap between him and anybody else on this list and Adams is huge. I think Adams the glue of this team. Maybe him and Brooks probably the 2 most important players of the 11 on the field. I think he's just the glue, and there's still a big gap between 1 and 2.
One quick thing, and then I'm gonna pass it off to Vince, is Busio actually ranked at 2 different positions. Some of us ranked him as a 6, some of us ranked him as an 8. So it was kind of, it was a hard place to fit him in this kind of exercise we're doing. So that's maybe why he was ranked so low. Because now that I'm looking about it, I'm almost like, I guess he ranks higher than Johnny. I don't know. We just talked about how Johnny didn't have a great Olympic qualifying. So yeah, it was just kind of hard for all of us to rank him in the same place, basically. Vince.
Yeah, Busio's higher than Johnny for me. I ranked him as 3rd behind Acosta. I think ultimately here's a couple different things to kind of think about. Number one, Tyler Adams, we all agree it completely changes the game. There isn't one specific position on this roster that is more vital to this than Tyler Adams. Like he's the one guy that if you take him out of the lineup, you have to kind of change your style of play a little bit. You can't supplement him on the roster at this point. You have to change the formation, something. And before the Gold Cup, when Acosta played so well, we were all kind of talking about on Twitter, do you have to take out the 6 and either play a double pivot, or do you play a third center back and let Brooks kind of play that build up role? And I think there's still something to be said for that if Adams is out. And guess what? Adams is out a lot. I think he's played. I think I might be able to count on one hand how many times he's played for the national team in the last 2.5 years. So it's just it's this unfortunate reality that he is certainly one of our top 3 players, in my opinion. And he's got this thing where I'm not positive if he's going to be on the field. And I think we can at least, say at this point, with all the World Cup qualifiers that are coming thick and fast, I mean, it's going to be 3 match day windows. He's not going to be on the field the whole time. So you're going to have to supplement for that. And you might have some times where he has to stay in Germany because of injury or rest or something like this. So that caveat being said, it's extremely important to have a backup 6 and a backup to the backup 6. And I think we got that in Acosta. Acosta does not play that role for Colorado. So when we see him and he doesn't look that comfortable the entire game, that's why. I think he has the skill set, because it's funny. We always want to say like, oh, well, he can play that destroyer role, but he's not very technical and he doesn't move the ball forward. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because he plays a 10 for his club. Like, I don't necessarily think that he's not a technical player. I actually used to think that was one of his strengths when he was in Dallas. So like, is it that he's not technical, or is he not comfortable? And I think that there's a difference. I just don't know if he's used to seeing the field behind that line. I think he's more used to playing in between the defensive and the midfield line. And it's just going to be interesting to me to see, can he get a move to Europe? Because if, let's say, you moved Kellen Acosta to somewhere where like Italy, where he can just focus on his technical aspects of his game, even if he's not playing all the time. Let's just say he's getting good training with a great coach that's going to basically focus on his fundamentals and technical side, and then just put him on the national team. We know he can play destroyer in that role. Can he develop as a 6 to the point where he's feeling comfortable in between the forward and the midfield line defensively, to the point where he's like able to kind of orchestrate the way that Tyler does, at least replicate it a little bit? That's something that I'd be interesting to see for Kellen. Moving to my third, which was Busio. And basically, he just needs to kind of develop the defensive aspects of his game. He's in a perfect spot going to Venezia. I think he's going to develop that side of his game as time goes on. So eventually, I'm feeling very comfortable that Busio will be the number 2 at some point. But I think that those 3 are the ones I'm counting on to kind of play that role. Johnny is a high ceiling player. Like you said, it's funny. It wasn't, to me anyways, that he had a bad Olympic qualifying campaign. That midfield just didn't work from a role perspective. I just don't know if the players around him were a good fit. So none of them looked very good, with the exception of Hassani Dotson, who isn't even close to the roster at this point.
Right.
And he's the only one that looked okay in that tournament from a midfielder perspective. So I just think I think Johnny's somebody that I'm looking at as, let's see how they develop over the next 12 to 18 months. I don't know if he's going to factor into this World Cup qualifying campaign. He might be more of a 2026 guy. And who was the 5th one that we had again? Odasoe again. Probably not a 2022 guy, probably a 2026 guy. Let's see how this move to Bruges goes.
All right. What we got next? Chris, you got the 8?
Yep, I think we got the 8. Yeah, the whole midfield 6, 8, and 10 is definitely a cool thing to see in this exercise. Just how many names are on here, but it's really nice to see the different things that's going on with the pool. But I'll get to it. So from 5 to 1, we have Christian Roldan. I personally did not have him on my list. but he's obviously he's a Berhalter guy. We know that that Berhalter likes him, and he's serviceable, and he's also if he could kind of take the moments that he has with the Sounders and have more moments like that with the national team, he's going to be one, more valuable, and two, he's going to win over some fans. That is remaining to be seen. And we'll see what happens. I feel like, in my opinion, I feel like there's guys that are much more technical and much better on the ball, and they're going to do more and contribute more than Christian Roldan. But I'll move on. Paxton Pomykal, number 4. Another guy he's not, I wouldn't say he's injury prone, but he has been out of the game for so long. The national team game, I should say, because I know he's playing for FC Dallas. And another guy who has a lot of fans, and some people think that he could be an answer in the midfield that could really be a calming presence and like put up fires and also be a distributor. And he's also versatile. He can play in the wing. So again, another guy I didn't list, but he is someone that could make the roster and could prove himself. Number 3 is Williamson. Definitely had a good Gold Cup. I feel like he looked a little bit like Jermaine Jones out there personally. Kind of like along the same lines as Busio, but a little bit more aggressive, like really got out there and just like not only didn't hesitate to get stuck in, like he was proactive as soon as he got the ball. He like picked his head up. Not too like flashy, not going to receive the ball in like a half turn and do something like magnificent. But again, somebody that's going to have a really, really big engine and is going to stay in that midfield and is going to fight for that ball every single time. So very valuable. Number 2, Luca Delatore, another interesting guy. I like him. I had him as my number 4, but he obviously you guys had him a little higher, so he ended up 2 here. I think he's good. Very peculiar situation with deciding to stay at Heracles and not take up the call to the Nations League. I believe he was supposed to go.
Gold Cup, I think.
Was it the Gold Cup?
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's what it was. It was the Gold Cup. Okay. Yeah, but either way, I definitely think he could have had a good summer. But I mean, it shows that he's loyal to that club and they believe in him, and so hopefully that pays out for him. He looked good in the friendlies. I wrote that down. That did the no Gold Cup hurt him? He did have good showings in friendlies, and he's another guy that's intelligent on the ball. He never seems to be someone that's going to make a mistake. And his transition from a winger to a midfielder, I should say, seems to have been a smooth one, and it's impressive. And then obviously our renowned number 1 would be Weston McKinney. I hear some chirping about him trying to leave Tottenham. He might go to Tottenham. I think he's staying at Juve. I think he's going to prove himself. I think he's Big Mac, as they like to call him. He's everything we need him to be. He's going to crash the box and score goals. He's going to be great on free kicks. He's going to score headers. He's passionate as hell. I love the way he plays. He's aggressive. I think we've all kind of told him like a little bit more technical Jermaine Jones for the team. He's all over the field. He's going to make plays, whether it be right in front of our 6 or putting a ball into one of our wingers at the opponent's 6. Like he's just a phenomenal player. Matty, what do you think of this 8 list?
So first off, Mckenzie is the glue. I mean, he's the guy of the team. You know, you could completely take his playing ability out of it, and everybody loves him. I feel like he's just the guy that he brings the team closer together. He's a big team guy. Luca Delatore, it's a little disappointing he didn't come in for the Gold Cup, because I feel like he almost doesn't have a chance to get called up to World Cup qualifying for. And we just named about 5 guys that greatly improved their stock during the Gold Cup. So he kind of missed out on a big opportunity, you know. And Eric Williamson is the best example of the opposite of that, because I probably didn't have him even ranked in the top 5 on the last ranking, you know, when we did this a couple months ago, 3-4 months ago. So his stock's increasing. What's going to happen with Luca Delatore? Christian Roldan just kind of sneaked in there at the very end, and then Paxton Pomykal just coming back from an injury. I guess it's good to see him, but you know, he needs to be a little more consistent, more playing time, more goals, and then he's could show up in a camp soon.
Yeah. Both,
Oh, okay.
sorry,
You were on mute.
yeah, my bad. It's like I'm trying to be polite. Yeah, before Marcus and Vince get in there, I just want to just clarify a little bit of the list that like Matty was talking about. I had Julian Greene as our number 2-8, and then some other names were in there. Busio was listed by, was that Matty?
I put him on there. Yeah.
And then and then Marcus had him too. So there was, like I was saying before, there were some names thrown out at other positions, and so that's what kind of like skewed the list, the full lists, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are a few guys on this, to your guys' point there, where like you're saying Busio is one, where it's like I probably would say that Busio at this point, in my opinion, is higher on the 8 list than Roldan, but it doesn't really matter because I'm basically only listing players at what I think that their best position is or their best opportunity for contribution with the national team is. So that's why Busio ends up on the 6th list for me. But if I was to cross over this list a little bit, there'd be some intermixing here where it'd be like, well, Julian Green I see more as a 10, but he probably is a better 8 than Christian Roldan is at this point. So there's just like this kind of crossover where it's like, if we put all the midfielders together, the 6s, the 8s, and the 10s, then it's just about Berhalter deciding what mix do I want to bring, because I know that I can take this guy and have him play a different role from here and there. Sort of the same thing that we were talking about from the left back and right back position. Do you take 3 right backs because you know you're just deeper there, and 2 can play the left back position? I think it's the same thing here. It's like you probably take 1 less 8 because Kellen Acosta can play the 8, and Gianluca Busio can play the 8. And at least one of the 10s can play the 8. So you probably only are taking Weston and maybe one other.
Marcus.
Yeah, I mean, I had Busio. I liked how he looked in front of Acosta in that, the last couple of games that he played. That was kind of where I put him there. But I agree, Vince. Like I see him as a 6, and that's probably where he's long term gonna head. Pomacall, like it's hard to get excited about a guy when he keeps getting hurt. And I'm not trying to pick on him, like I know people are super high on him. It's hard for me to get excited about him. Roldan, I thought it was kind of funny. I caught a brief clip from Greg, and apparently his pep talk to Roldan, and he was embarrassed about. He's like, "You're one of those great guys coming off the bench, in Gold Cup or whatever." And I'm like, that like you shouldn't share that. Like that's not helping the guy. And I know what he meant, but that's what I feel like. It's like, he's a feel-good guy. I'm sure he's great in the locker room, but he's not, in my opinion, amongst, the top of this list, which is very top-heavy with Weston. A lot of people are knocking him at Schalke. I think he's shown, what he's capable of. I've been a huge Luca fan, him and Brooks Lennon since the U20s. I still think Brooks has potential and could be a strong winger. Not necessarily with the talent we have. I just think he's like an Areola type, just a strong, solid MLS career, probably in the mix at some January camps and Gold Cups, just good player. But Luca's made a name for himself and he's done well in Eredivisie, which almost nobody except for maybe Ledesma has found success in. So, big props to him for going there. And Williamson, I was really impressed with, very raw, very, very raw player. But I liked his energy. I like what he brought. I thought he was good. I'm excited we're building a little bit of depth there.
Well, one like little note on that is like, here's where Luca missed out by not going, because Williamson had a very good Gold Cup. And now, Greg has to play this fine line of, I don't want to upset the chemistry. I want to reward the players that won me 2 trophies over the summer. Does Luca get a call in 2 weeks? I don't know the answer to that. He might suffer the consequences for that decision purely because he opened himself up to like, hey, some other guys who might play well and take that spot. So even though we collectively rank him as the second best, Williamson might be the better pick for the qualifiers just from a chemistry perspective.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Chris, you got the 10s.
Yep. All right. Okay. So again, still same story here. There's going to be a bunch of different names. You might see some surprises because everybody was listing different people. So from 5 to 1, we have I guess our newest Wonder Boy, right? Caden Clark. who's balling out for Red Bulls. I think he has 4 goals and 2 assists or something like that. And he's just looked phenomenal. Obviously, he's going to be a Leipzig player in December, I want to say, when he turns 18. So hopefully he goes right into camp with them and can become a starter, can contribute in the Bundesliga. And the sky looks like the limit for this kid. He looks like the real deal. Again, another guy that can play on the wing, very versatile, smart on the ball. My favorite part of his game is he's not afraid to shoot outside the box. I don't think that happens enough for our national team. I feel like there should be guys that are wanting to take risks left and right like that. I feel like sometimes they try to do a little bit more and try to get that sneaky pass in instead of just trying to just put their laces through one. Number 4, Sebastian Lejet. I mean, what can you say about the guy? He's the consummate professional with the national team. I feel like the best way to describe his game is it's very minimal mistakes. I know he gets some flack, especially on Twitter he passes left and right and all that stuff. But obviously he plays his part. And me personally, I think that Lejet looks really, really good with the higher tier players around him. When he's got 2 wingers like, let's just say Pulisic and Weah to his left or right, he's going to look a little bit better than he would if he has, I don't want to knock anybody, but let's just say Chris Muller and I don't know, Paul Areola on the other side. He's going to look a little different because he knows that Christian and Weah can do some different things. And for number 3, we had Julian Green. Again, I'm a big Julian Green fan. I think that he is not only like very battle tested. I think that he can shoot outside the box as well. I like that in his game. I like that he made that transition from a winger forward player into a number 8 and fought tooth and nail to get his team promoted to the Bundesliga. That's no small accomplishment. And I know that doesn't say much about his true technical game, but it shows who his character is and his willingness to go through the fire and like how much he believes in himself to go. And again, going back to what I said before, like betting on himself and going through those trials and tribulations and getting all the way back. Didn't really look exactly the best in his Bundesliga debut this season, but Stuttgart looks to be like a strong team and they kind of dismantled first. But I like Julian Green. And then number 2, we have Musa, who I know some people are going to listen to this and say like, oh, we should have been listed as an 8, but obviously we all have different opinions. Musa is a very, very clean player. I love the way that he's smooth on the ball. We've all seen those highlights of how he can take the ball in a half turn and one touch and boom, he's gone. He's very, very good in the midfield. We saw how good the midfield looked with him, Mckinney and Adams. It's very dynamic. It's very fluid. It's very pleasing to the eye. And Moose is a very smart player. And then number 10 is Giovanni Reina. And I feel like the way that he's having the season start for Dortmund is just going to be telling for hopefully the start of Gio Reyna becoming the offensive midfield engine for our national team. Dortmund's playing with dual 8s and they take turns going up and down the field, but Gio looks so good on the half turn. He's so calm on the ball. This first Bundesliga game, I want to say there's one play in particular where he kind of takes the ball, takes the ball, and then it's like a really tight window and he tries a little outside of the ball, outside of the foot, like through ball to Jude Bellingham, and it's such a tight window, and the gall to like go for that and to believe in himself. I think that's what really is going to make him such a good 10 for us. I love the kid. Obviously, I'm kind of a homer because I love Dortmund too, but he just looks like he could be our best player. Vince, what do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, I'm just so high on Gio. I think he's a terrific, terrific young player. I think he's only going to go up. I love his confidence. I love his basically literal perpetual body language, which is basically just like this. He's always has his hands up. He's always like just pissed off that he doesn't have the ball. And I think if I was a Dortmund player, specifically a guy like Royce, like I would just be so pissed off all the time. Like, who are you? Why are you asking for the ball so much? But it's funny. Like I just think he's just a terrific young player. I think that the world is really going to find out what he's all about in the next 2 or 3 years. It's just the beginning for him. Musa, same thing. Like I'm really high on him every single time he's played with the national team. He's been an absolute star, and that was why it was just so strange to me that he didn't get a minute in Nations League. He was the only outfield player that didn't. So it's just that was a little frustrating for me, just because I think he's just such a talented player, and of course I have the dual national panic where I'm worried about losing the guy. Mm-hmm. But it's just funny as we go down this list. Caden Clark is at some point, again, going to be a massive young player, and so like where does he fit in? Long term on this team is going to be interesting. And then just again as we talk about like just the intermixing of roles here. And which mix of midfielders actually get called. Just to kind of go back to that argument. I mean, Brendan Erinson can play the attacking midfielder role. There's just a lot of different things that I would look at this and say, like, how many 10s do we actually need on this roster? How many of those 10s can play the 8 role? And so you're just kind of pushing guys down and down the roster, and which mix of midfield. So if there's anything that we learned from the Olympic qualifying campaign, it's like, again, that mix of midfield matters more than the individual players sometimes. So like, we have to have guys that are playing and complementing each other really well. I do think that the Tyler Adams, Yunus Musa, and Gio Reyna midfield would complement each other very well. Same thing with Weston McKinney. I think all 4 of those guys kind of basically have to be locks in each World Cup qualifying roster. And then it's just about, supplementing the roster with some other players that play those roles that just as effectively.
One thing I wanted to say is in regards to Sebastian Lejet, I feel like after the Gold Cup and towards the end of it, at least, his stock was falling quite rapidly. So if you look at, obviously we know he's going to get called up a handful of times in the next, 15 months or a year. But I think he's a guy that we're probably not going to see on the actual World Cup roster come November 2022. And it's because of all the things that you just said about all these other guys. I mean, we know Rain is ahead of him, and Musa, if he chooses to use him as a backup 10 role, that's another guy. And so although Lejet is very versatile, and although he is one of Bert's guys, I think he's just somebody that is on the slight decline and could end up missing out on that first World Cup, on the World Cup roster, not the qualifying.
I only disagree with you because I feel like he's a Berhalter guy. 2 things. One, and then the second is he's still, I think, our most successful attacking player as far as like XG and statistically. I still think he's one of our best offensive guys. He went to Nations League and Gold Cup. Like, I feel like he's in Berhalter's inner circle. Musa didn't play, is hurt now, interesting club situation. Clearly doesn't rate Green, hasn't brought him in anywhere or shown any trust in him. And same with Caden Clark, like has not pulled Caden into anything. Caden wasn't even a part of Olympic qualifying, which I found bizarre. We clearly needed a goal scorer and he wasn't a part of it. So my only thought on Lejet staying power is the clearly lack of trust. But when I look at that list, I mean, that's competing with the right back position for me. I mean, as I look at that, like our 5th is going to be at RB Leipzig, very likely. There's talk of him maybe staying one more year because of the appendectomy and potentially Brendan Areola moving over,
right.
Or potentially Leipzig, just whatever's best for development for Caden. He might get punted back to New York for a year or at least till the summer, which would hurt obviously his chances at 22, if he's at Red Bull. Green has not gotten a shot yet. Musa, was not trusted in Nations League. That's where my questions come in, where I could see him taking Lejet just from a trust factor, not from a talent factor. And condolences to the Lejet family as well. I know he lost his sister this week. Tough week for them, but I think statistically he's still there and somebody that Berhalter trusts.
Yeah. To your earlier point, Matty, like when you said Reem might be the guy that's brought for the veteran leadership Berhalter guy thing, I think it's not Reem. I think it's Lejet. I think there's no chance in hell he's not on the World Cup roster. And I think a lot of us are going to sit there and think we've got better attacking midfielders, but it's just more of the glue guy, the veteran leadership guy, the guy that is just going to play your role and not make any mistakes. And I think he's the first one that's off the roster after 2022. Yeah. That's what I think. I think basically, and like piggybacking off of what Marcus just said, like there's no reason to rush Caden along. As much as I rate him and as much as I think he's a terrific player, he's not a duel, unfortunately for him, because he probably already would have gotten his call up.
Yep.
But like the fact that he isn't a duel means that you can afford to be patient with him. And if I was him, I would know my time is coming. And I'd do the Brendan Erinson thing. Like I heard Brendan say in his in an interview, I forget what podcast, maybe it was with Grant Wall, but he said like I had other offers, like he had offers for the Bundesliga, but Salzburg was a better fit for him because he knew he'd play every day. And it, to me, like, look what he's doing in Salzburg now. And that's just raising his value. He's raising his game. He's very clearly a better player in the last 6 months since he's been there. Mm-hmm. So I just think that, like, if Caden is smart, he won't get ahead of himself. If it's back to New York or a loan to Salzburg and Erinson gets moved to Leipzig, I think that might be smart, because if I'm him, I'm thinking my destination is 2023. I know I'm probably not going to be on the 22 roster. Maybe Greg can afford to be honest with him because he's not a duel and say, look, I rate you really highly. I want you to focus on your development because you're going to play a very, very big role in 2026.
I also think like his best position is a true 10, and we don't really leverage that. We it's more of a dual 8 kind of / dual 10s, but he's like a true 10. That's really his true gifting is. He's not being used like that in New York. He's kind of a winger, sort of, gets pulled in.
Yeah, comes inside.
Yeah. And he wouldn't do that for the national team. So it's not like, positionally he doesn't fit with what Greg is trying to do right now as well. So I think that's going to hurt him in the short term.
Well, again, with the Brendan Erinson comp, like when you watched him in Philly, that was exactly him. You're sitting there thinking like, okay, I guess he's playing as like a shuttler, and sometimes he's playing as a 10, but he doesn't really have the defensive bite to play the 8. So you're kind of thinking he's a true 10, and now we know he can play winger because that's the role that he has to play for the national team. So it might be the exact same thing with Caden. Ultimately, he might have to go out and play wing. Guess what? We're about to get to the wingers, and he's not breaking into that anytime soon.
The wingers look good.
Yeah.
The wingers look good, but it's so surprising of how not great it was at the Gold Cup.
True.
Anyway, let's get into that, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, let's get into it. But basically, the reason for that is because we just consistently don't call up the wingers.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't understand it, but that's why that ends up happening. So we call in these squads, and it's the same thing with the Olympic qualifying roster. Same thing with the Gold Cup roster. It's like we have wingers to call, but we just don't call them.
Yeah. All right, we want to get into the wings.
Let's do it.
So I want to call this out first. Musa Reina. And we didn't have Ledesma on there, who's been playing a wing, not on this list. So it gets exciting when we get into that, when we think about that, like the talent that we could also play at wing that we've already kind of put in other positions. So starting at 10, Paul Areola, I think he's a known name, wore the captain's band at Gold Cup, tons of World Cup experience. He for me is one of those guys like Edlin, that I think that World Cup experience that carry over, like that's probably where his true value is, not necessarily what he brings on the field. It's really what he brings in the locker room. Again, another guy that I think would bump Ream off of that list for me. But I think Lejet fills that role, and Edlin. We had number 9, Chris Muller. He's over in, Hibs, Hibernian, over in the Scottish Premier League. Credit to him. He's betting on himself. This is last year, with his MLS contract. He's 24, a little bit older. He's not kind of in those kids range, like most of the rest of this list. So, I think he's betting on himself, hoping to catch the attention in Europe and try and squeeze in where he can. He kind of, jumped on the scene last year, and, we'll see what happens with him. Number 8's a pretty exciting one for me. Cowell, 17-year-old, He hasn't been called up yet, but he was called into Gold Cup as a possible replacement for Areola. They ended up not releasing him, but he's part of that 2003s with Caden and others. I mean, super strong class. He's got 4 goals and 4 assists in 13 games with MLS, and I think he turns 18 in October. So I would be surprised if he's not in Europe by January. Number 7, Tyler Boyd. Right now he's at Besiktas. Is that how you say that?
Besiktas.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, he's over in Turkey, but had some tough club situation. I think he's got 10 caps. He's been around for a while. I think he's probably on the, or I know that he's kind of on that outside looking in. But if he gets a move, I think he's in that sort of next tier from this next group, which I think we kind of level up a little bit at number 6, which is kind of funny. 6 and 5, I'll put them together. Giacchini and Matthew Hoppe. 2 strikers, to your point earlier, Vince, of not bringing in wingers. We brought in 2 strikers. I thought they both actually performed pretty well.
Yeah.
I thought both of them had good Gold Cups. Giacchini had the huge assist in Qatar. Hoppe, I thought was dangerous the whole time. He scored against Jamaica. Plenty of dangerous balls. Like I'm pretty excited about Hoppe. Before this year, nobody was talking about him. He gets the hat trick. First American to get a hat trick in the Bundesliga. And who knows? There's talk of Premier League and others for him. And I thought Giacchini looked good as well. Very dangerous and very clever when he had the ball. So and then for me, this is the big 4. I think we really level up when we get to this Final 4. Conrad De La Fuente. He just moved over from Barcelona to Marseille. Huge League One club. They've been investing a ton. Scored or got an assist in his first game. Fans, I think, had him as man of the match in the second game. I mean, he just has looked good. Obviously, it's only 2 games into the season, but I've been a big fan of him for a while. Everybody said it's just because of the Barcelona crest. It's like, no, this guy could play, and here he is in League One, balling out. So I'm excited for him. I think he's got huge potential. We rated Brendan Erinson. We talked a little bit about him. I thought he was maybe one of our best high press players throughout Nations League. Like he really impressed me through that tournament. I wasn't big on him at Philly. I thought he was going to stumble a little bit. Vince, I think you talked a little bit about this, and he went 100% the other way. I think in the last 6 months, to me, he's really improved his name and fighting for a starting spot, in my opinion, with number 2, Tim Weah. European champion, League One champion. He had the big injury, has fought his way back, getting started minutes. And to me, I think he's, fighting with a couple of really good players to be a starting right wing for us. In my opinion, one of the biggest game changers in that Nations League final against Mexico. When he came on the field, Weston and Pulisic, I thought played significantly better, brought a ton of energy. I thought he was a game changer against Mexico for me. And then number 1, do I need to say anything about Christian Pulisic? The original Captain America, the man, the legend, the $80 million man. A lot of conversation about his health, over the last couple of years. But, when he's on the field, gets the job done, scores a penalty, beats Mexico, asks somebody else to call the corner and hits it, the king. Matty, what do you think?
So first off, if we look at those for the top 4, like you said, the big 4 are huge. And that's the crazy thing. So if we look at the Gold Cup roster, the best wingers on it were the 2 forwards that we just mentioned in Hoppe and Giacchini. And then you look at some of the other wingers on it, it was just kind of weak. Areola could be one of those guys that is going one way or the other. He's either going to be enough of Berhalter's guys to hang around, one of Berhalter's guys to hang around long enough to be on the actual World Cup roster, or he's going to make a handful of World Cup qualifying rosters and then just fizzle once we see this full kind of depth chart play out. So I'm not sure what he's going to do. And like you said, who didn't we have on here? I mean, we also had
I could see Areola knocking
on here,
a
like,
Conrad off, where it's like
Yeah.
he doesn't have the trust yet. The quality is clearly there, but he hasn't built that relationship. He's got one cap, and he fumbled the shot, and everybody kind of threw up their arms and we're done with him, because he missed one shot. I thought he actually had a decent game. But I could see where trust would come into play and chemistry, that I think Vince was bringing up earlier, where it's like somebody that that's played with these guys.
I was just mentioning Ulianes. I mean, that's, he's got a little bit of bad form as of lately, but, if he pops in the next 6 months, no one would be surprised if he inserted himself on a World Cup qualifying roster.
Not at all.
So, it goes deeper than 10.
Ledesma too, when he gets back,
Yeah.
he was cracking, starting lineup.
Yeah, he had just made his first or second appearance for PSV, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he actually hurt himself in a Europa League game. That was
his first start, I think. Yeah.
So disappointing.
It's tough.
Yeah, Marcus, I completely agree with you with Wea. I think I was so fired up when he came in that game. I remember I was clapping so hard just for a couple of different reasons, like sentimental, because I knew that how much it meant to him. And I knew that he had all this confidence coming off such a good season. And he was just ready to go. And I agree with you. It's just bringing him on the field. He's one of the best, if not the best, off ball runners that we have in the pool. Yeah. He knows how to stretch defenses like no one else. He's going to take a center back, or he's going to cut back and stop at the right time to make sure that a lane is open for a pass. He's so smart when it comes to that stuff, and just getting himself in good positions. It's going to be interesting with Erinson because he's played strictly as a 10. I think it's as a 3-4-2-1 or something like that, or 4-4-2 diamond, with Salzburg, and he's been playing as a 10. I know he just recently scored a goal, so it'll be interesting to see how Berhalter sees him in either role. Does he see him as that true 10? Does he see him as a better winger? But yeah, and then Conrad, man, first game for Marseille, and he gets an assist, and then he got the MLS or the hockey assist, whatever you want to call it, in the second game. He's just looked phenomenal, and he looks very, very technical on the ball. He looks ready to go, aggressive, right at defenders, exactly what you want from a winger. And it's going to make it very interesting because he's doing this all on the left side. So it obviously no one's going to push Pulisic away if he's healthy, but it's very, very exciting. With Hoppy, I think that he's got that Dempsey edge to him where he's just going to try shit. And it's fun to watch. He's another one that I like, that he takes chances outside the box. He's not scared to rip a shot. And then it kind of falls a little bit. I mean, Giacchini was pretty good in the Gold Cup. He looked. I like that outside of the boot pass that he had. That was nice. He's got a little bit of technical qualities to him. And then like that bottom four, you got a combination of young enough like Cade Cowell, he can prove himself. We don't know what's going to go on with Boyd. And then Areola just got hurt again. So, and then Muller, I think Muller might be the one guy, and Muller and Boyd kind of just on the outside looking in right now.
And Morris isn't even on that list either. I 6 months ago,
I was actually just looking up. I was just looking up his injury, trying to figure out when he's expected to come back. I saw a video of him on Instagram or something the other day, actually.
Yeah.
Sprinting. So
he was in individual training, so he's probably 2 months away, 3 months away, maybe.
Actually, I think it talks something about, is he going to be possibly ready for playoffs or something?
Yeah, for playoffs.
Where does he fall in if he was 100% healthy for, let's say, the September, October, November window, or let's push him out a little further. Let's give him till the next window after that, which would be next January. If he's fully fit in January, where would he fall in this kind of top 10 list?
It's a great question, just because, ultimately going back to what we're saying about this positional versatility thing, I know we're not doing it for the sake of this exercise, but I mean, two of the 10s for me are 5th and 6th on this roster. So Gio and Yunus Musa, to me, are probably ahead of Matthew Hoppy. And Matthew Hoppy looked very good and is only going to progress from here, might get a move to maybe even the Premier League. So it's just it's going to be extremely challenging for him to re-enter this fray. especially the fact that, I'm with Marcus. I'm super high on Conrad, like just super, super high on Conrad. I'm finding it like the whole Joe Scally thing where we were saying like after 2 games, we just immediately elevate him. I'm finding it extremely difficult not to say he's the starting right wing. Like after 2 appearances with Marseille, he's just looked that good. And I mean, Reina's better as a 10. So like I from my perspective, it's like, please just put Conrad on at right wing. If he doesn't get called in 2 weeks, I'm going to be just extremely upset. I want to see him integrated with this team. I think he's just got such a massively high ceiling. And I think he does some of the things that will complement Pulisic from just a stylistic point of view. I think he's just extremely fast. He's going to be able to run by guys, and I just think that will take a little bit of the pressure off of Christian on the opposite side. So it just, to me, it matches really well to Chris's point about Tim Weah being able to come in and play a different stylistic role, like off-ball runner in behind that, and you can also insert him at the striker position when they're playing a high line as well. So it's just, there's a couple really, really interesting things that you can do with Conrad in the fold. So like, to me, you have to bring him in. And I'm going to say something pretty controversial right now. I'm going to say a pretty hot take here. Brendan Erinson is better at the system, at Berhalter's system, than Christian Pulisic. That's just what it is. Like, if you watch him play in the times where he's played with the USMNT, Brendan Erinson fits the system perfectly. Like, that's just why he ends up in the right spots. So Christian's obviously a better player, but playing the role that Berhalter wants from his winger, Brendan Erinson plays the role perfectly. So I just don't know how you get him out of the lineup. So this is my point on Caden Clark. If you're putting him and saying like, oh, well, he has to be a winger on this roster, where does he fit on this team? Because he's going to be like 9th, 10th, especially if you're factoring Jordan Morris. He's not. I know that Jordan Morris is polarizing, but Caden Clark is not a better winger than Jordan Morris is when he's healthy right this second.
And the way he was putting goals in, like, that's not necessarily the strength of many of our wingers to score, to be a scoring winger beyond Pulisic. And I agree with you with and I call him the big 4. Like, I think it's very game scenario specific. Like, if we're playing a defensive front, I would say BA is probably the number 1, like the number 1 defensive, high press attacking winger. And maybe Pulisic's too. I love Weah coming off the bench. Like, I just think that just watching that energy, like, we need that guy. But I'm with you. I love Conrad. Like, like, I mean, just watching him take guys on, he does things that others can and will open the game up like no other winger, like true wing. He's a true winger. He doesn't cut inside as much. Like, he draws the defense out. Like, I geeked out on his last 2 games. I watched him twice, like, been making PowerPoint decks about him, just for my own nerdiness. Yep. Like, I've just been geeking out just watching his game. I'm super, super high on him, but I think it's very situational.
Yeah. And Musa and Reina as ball carriers, if you need that out wide for some reason. I mean, like, it's just, there's so many interesting things that you can do. And several of those guys, you just know are going to be on the roster. So like, when I look at this, I'm saying those 4 wingers right off the top, those have to be my wingers. I just don't see a way like that you can intermix. They all play different roles. And you know that you're calling in Musa and Reina when they're healthy, and they can play separate roles too. So it's just like, to answer your question about where does Jordan Morris fit in at this point, circling back to that, I just don't know. I think at this point, if Conrad gets called in 2 weeks and plays well, I don't know where Jordan Morris fits when he gets back. I just don't. He plays like the similar role that Tim Weah would, and Tim Weah is better, in my opinion. So like, I just don't know where he would fit.
Maybe we just play without a striker or 6, and we just go 4-2-2-2-2 and just play 4 wingers, play them all.
Might have to when we get to the striker position in a second. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's a good segue right there. Go for it, man.
Do we want to go straight into the striker? Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Yeah.
All right. So number 5, we've got Ricardo Pepe. 4, we've got Giassi Zardes. 3, we've got Daryl Dike. 2, we've got P Folk, and 1, we got Sargent. So here's the kind of rundown on these 5 guys. So Ricardo Pepe, we'll see if he is USMNT committed, I think within the next 6 months, probably. I do think that especially there's some injuries right now, like P-Fuck got injured, DK didn't dress his last game out, Jesse Zardes just got hurt. So according to our depth chart, maybe you get Pepe called in a couple weeks just to kick the tires and see if he'll commit. That's what I do personally, but you know, that's why Greg Berhalter, I guess, is a better, more moral man than I am. But you know, I would definitely do that. I think Ricardo Pepe is extremely high ceiling. I love his game. I think he's kind of exploding at the right time. And, you know, you guys know this, he's produced at every level to this point. So like, I'm not positive where he won't produce, because it's not like Dallas is a wagon and they're not creating a billion chances for whoever's playing striker. So, you know, he did well in USL. He's doing well in MLS. I think he's going to do well in Europe within the next 6 to 12 months. Jesse Zardes, he's a role guy, similar to what we've been talking about with the Berhalter kind of crew. And I don't know if that needs to be a negative connotation anymore. We know what he is. We know he'll play the role. He doesn't need to be this extremely high ceiling. We don't need to rank him as the number 1 guy. I just think he plays the role. I think we saw that in the Gold Cup of like, by the end of the Gold Cup, everybody was saying Daryl DK shouldn't start in the final. Zardes should start in the final, because we knew he'd play the role well.
It was
and we were right. Yeah, and we were right, and we won the final. So Daryl DK, number 3, he just didn't take that chance in the Gold Cup, unfortunately. He might have been injured, so we'll kind of get to that. So maybe that played a role, but he didn't, you know, whether or not he was or not, he didn't take that chance. I'm of the opinion, I've said this a million times on Twitter, let's not rush the guy. He's clearly a freak of nature. He's going to be an amazing, amazing striker. He's got some holes to his game. Let's let him develop those things before we automatically anoint him the starter. P-Folk had a really good season in Switzerland last year. He's a technical striker. I think he's very good at finishing. Why take him out of the number 2 role until DK is developed? In my opinion, I wouldn't. And then Josh Sargent, polarizing because I guess he doesn't finish from the club perspective. He finishes in an okay rate for the US. And guess what? He plays the role, similar to the way that I was saying about Brendan Erinson. He plays the role of the system perfectly. So trust me, Greg Berhalter's not rushing to get Josh Sargent out of the lineup, because he counter presses extremely well. He works really hard off the ball. And you've got a billion creators around him that we were just talking about from the wingers and 10 perspective, and even Weston McKennie bombing from the 8. And you've got the outside backs with Serginho Dest. You have enough creators on the field that you kind of just need somebody that's going to glue them together. Look at what Olivier Giroud did for France for so long. Like, he never scores for France, but France won the World Cup. Why? Because you need somebody to basically just play that role to let all the creators and all the playmakers around them play well. And to me, Josh Sargent is basically the U.S. cheap guys version of Olivier Giroud.
And
with all those injuries, you pull a Hoppy, Gioacchini, you know, is that kind of next guys up, you know, with all assuming those guys aren't ready to go in 2 weeks, you know, the 3 that you mentioned.
You saying?
I think so.
Are you saying as a striker?
Yeah, Zardes, you know, it looked like a hamstring. That's probably at least a month, you know, 4 to 6 weeks, I would guess. Right. You know, I don't know about DK's situation, you know, if he's healthy or whatever.
Is it his shoulder, what he did in Gold Cup?
I don't know. He hasn't played since he's gotten back. I don't think he even dressed. Is that right, Vince?
Yeah, that's the thing about MLS is they don't really need to provide injury reports, which sucks for us. Yeah. But like, you know, you don't always get like the clearest answers. You know how in the Premier League, the day before the game, they do these press conferences. The first question every single time is run down the injury list for us, and they do it. There's just not the equivalent of that in MLS. So like, you don't always get this clarity of why somebody's out of the lineup. We're seeing that with Carlos Gil with the New England Revolution right now. It's like nobody really knows why he was hurt a couple weeks ago.
Could be there's teams sniffing around or something to purchase him.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have thought prior to the Gold Cup of like, you don't want to play him because you don't want to risk injuries. You know, $15 million striker probably, and you just want to get him sold and moved along. But I do think he's hurt. I think that the interest around him has cooled in Europe after his performances on the back end of the championship, and then again in the Gold Cup. So I think basically and again, we don't need to rush him. He'll do fine developing a little bit more in MLS if he waits till next summer. He's still an extremely young player. He's only a year into his professional career. Let's just chill on the guy.
Ranked Bobby Wood.
I was just gonna say I wanted to shout you out, Matty.
I'll admit it. It was a stretch, but
Got an assist last night.
Say it again.
Got an assist last night.
And he had another goal, a week or two ago, and it was a bit knee jerk. I'm a big Bobby Wood fan. He's still only 28. I know he's probably never going to be in a USA shirt again, and I'm fine with that. But I just figured I would throw him out there as a reach.
Gio and Hoppy, I mean, they're not wingers, you know. I mean, we put them there, but you know, they're strikers for their clubs.
Hey, Bobby Wood could pull an Alan Gordon and just come in and do some work for us.
There you go.
Possible.
I think Tim Way is the backup striker in this, and if every one of those guys are healthy or not healthy, I should say. I think Hoppy would make the roster, but I think that Tim Way would get the first look off the bench.
That makes sense.
What is the deepest position that we have, Marcus?
I mean, I guess I would go winger when I think about quality, but man, we're getting deep at a lot of positions. Mm-hmm. When I think about quality, like we're talking 5, 6 being a top 5 starter, you know, I mean, and that's like, I'm talking Musa, Reina, you know, potential, you know, our list, you know, we're still talking a big 4. I think when I think about quality at 4 and 5, there's nothing like winger.
Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
I think it's definitely got to be right back. It's. I mean, it has to be. We're like to the point we were talking about before. Brian Reynolds is number 5 on our list. Henry Wingo is on the verge of becoming a Champions League player, and he's nowhere near our list. Chris Richards can play as a right back. We have so many players, and the funniest thing is that inside joke, or not even an inside joke, but that joke on Twitter of making a USMNT 11 of all right backs, and you're like, wow, that guy, Tyler, oh yeah, that kind of works, and like even like it's crazy to see that all those names, but I think it's got to be right back. We just have depth upon depth, Europa League guys all over the place. I feel like I'm missing one person.
We even push guys over to left back.
Yeah, Joe Scally is technically a pure right back, or was started out as a right back. So it's like we have all these guys that can play. They come up at that position, and they're going to get pushed out because there's so many other people that are better. So I think it's got to be right back for me.
Vince?
Yeah, it's right back. If what we're talking about is like 1 through 10 or 1 through 12 for just one spot, not the winger position, which is technically 2. If we're talking about 1 through 10 being, you know, we're fine with them getting a roster spot. I mean, that's the reality at right back at this point. From a quality of starter perspective, that's where I'm going back to it with what Marcus was saying is like, winger at this point, there's 6 guys that I'm like, yeah, start them. I'm perfectly fine with them starting at the winger position. Center back is interesting because I wouldn't consider it deep, but like we were talking about earlier, like 2 through 7 with Sands, I think at this point, I'm fine with them being on the roster. I just don't know who fits the best as a starter. So it's just like this interesting kind of spot. And then also from like the winger side of it, like anybody on the roster, I'm fine with starting. Goalkeeper, 1 through 3, I'm perfectly fine with any of those 3 guys starting. So is that also depth? It's not deep from a behind the roster perspective, and that's where like the right back for me is like there are guys that are not going to make this roster that absolutely could in any other generation. Whereas winger and goalkeeper, I think the majority of the guys that I would want on the roster are going to make the roster, but it's just going to be extremely competitive for us to see who starts.
Yeah, the right back position is pretty solid. I'd probably say right back. A little bit of a shout to center back as well. like you mentioned, the guys outside of that 2 through 7, they are kind of declining. I mean, we know CCV, he needs a move. He needs something to happen. After the poor performance against Tottenham, or with Tottenham today, I should say. I don't know, maybe he just needs a completely new environment. He doesn't need to be owned by Tottenham anymore. He needs to be sold and stay somewhere for a couple of years and build his confidence. And who knows, as a 23-year-old, I think we said 22-year-old, he can come back in 3 years and prove himself again and add himself back into the conversation. But aside from him and Tim Ream, the other 7, maybe 8 guys are trending upward. And then we have guys on there that we didn't even list. In Justin Che. Somebody listed Brian Oko. Is that how you say his last name? Oko. So it's also a very, very deep position.
I think 10, like wing, it's got some quality, man. Like when we're talking Caden Clark at the 5, our most productive offensive player at 4, and Sebastian Lejet. We didn't include Brendan Erinson here, but he clearly could play at 10. I think Reina maybe, the potentially, or ceiling at least, the best player in the pool, could very well be one of the best players, out of this group. Musa, huge ceiling. I don't think he's even begun to unlock, some of the qualities. And then Julian Green, another Bundesliga starter,
All right, go the other way. What about our shallowest? We're going to use that as a word for tonight. I don't know if it is, but Marcus, what's our shallowest or most shallower position?
Man, I got to go back to left back. I think, although 6 is a bit bumpy too. Striker is pretty soft.
Yeah, those are the 3 in contention.
Yeah, I'll stick with left back. I think past Robinson, there's just a lot of unknowns. Vines, has had a bumpy start. I've not really been high on him. I think Bello has a high ceiling, but he's all attacking. He really needs to develop his defensive game, which he will. I think in time, if he goes to Europe, very high on Jogo, but he's very raw. Today, I think Vince brought this up. We're like number 5. Let's grab a right back that's played 1 game, in the Bundesliga and throw him on our top 5 list. I would say probably, that group's pretty soft from a depth perspective.
I mean, Berhalter might bring, a handful of right backs on the roster of guys that could just play both sides of the ball. And it might be Anthony, Dest, Cannon and Moore, or Cannon and Yedlin, or Moore and Yedlin. And only bring 1 true left back.
That's probably what I would do, in my opinion.
You think 6 events?
Yeah, I'm going to say 6, and this is why, because of you guys just touched on it. Like, there are right backs that can play left back, and we'd feel fine with them. So Serginho Dest, Reggie Cannon, Shaq Moore. On top of that, Anthony Robinson. I think Vines is fine for most CONCACAF opponents. And I actually think Bello is developing that defensive side of his game. And against Mexico and Tecatito, he did very well.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long he's going to be a quote-unquote defensive liability. I totally see what you're saying. There are some games, especially for Atlanta, that I think he is. But I think he's so focused on developing that aspect of his game, and I think he's got the ceiling for it, that I don't think that's going to be too long. Joe Scally obviously is just kind of coming into his own. We'll see if he keeps his form. It's been 2 games, but so I think that there are options from a left back perspective at the 6. And this is I go back to what I said when we were having this discussion earlier. You take Tyler Adams out of it, you still have to change the way that you play immediately. There isn't anybody else that can play that role. Kellen Acosta did it well at the Gold Cup, but there are aspects of his games that just don't play that role very well. He doesn't key the offense as well as Tyler does, or anybody else does, really. So it's just this interesting perspective. And then everybody behind him is too offensive minded and doesn't have enough defensive bite. So to me, that's still the most shallow position that we have, just purely because if you take Tyler Adams out of it, I'm literally just watching that specific player all night. I'm just waiting to see how they do, and their performance will dictate whether or not we win the game.
Or we change our formation, which I would probably be a bigger fan of, to 3 center back.
Yeah.
It's that bad. It's let's just switch the whole formation.
Get some people to cover, so it makes the midfielders' job
or whatever.
a little easier.
Yep.
Do you think
exactly.
Chris, you think it's the 6 or the
Yeah,
left or left back?
I think it's 6 as well. It's like I'm trying to think of a good analogy to like apply to it. Like Adams is such a gold standard, and then Acosta's like serviceable at like it not maybe a little bit above serviceable now, and then the rest of it is just like guys that need to prove themselves there. And then like Vince was saying, we got to change the system for it to work so well, or the formation or something along those lines. It's just like to that steep the steep cliff that we jump off of once Tyler Adams is not on the field is, I think that's the definitive factor that makes it such a shallow position, the shallowest.
Yeah. You look at the 3 guys that we listed after Adams and Acosta are Johnny, a player that is not a consistent starter. Odasoe, who's getting a move in the middle of a move, wasn't a consistent starter at Wolves. Busio, who's a consistent starter, at least that's playing. We didn't even mention Jackson Ewell, which I'm just mentioning his name because, I'm not the highest. I don't rate him very high at all, but that's just to show how much it drops off basically after Acosta. We also listed Booth and Tessman, but I still think it is a massive gap after Acosta of what happens next in an awful situation of where both of those guys would be injured. I mean, what happens there? Is it Mckinney that comes back and plays the 6 because he can play every position?
Right,
Or
Sands.
yeah,
Sands.
or Sands,
yeah.
right.
Or Sands. Yeah. It's Sands, or you play Musa and Mckinney in the double pivot, change to a 3-back. That's
Right.
what you'd have to do.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not even we're not even looking at the third best winger in our rankings. It's he goes elsewhere because the guy's not ready, I guess.
Yeah. That's what I think. And ultimately, like, I think that this changes. Like, it wasn't too long ago where I was looking at the winger position and I was thinking, well, like after Pulisic, there's not really anybody that's really, that was like a year ago.
Well, yeah.
So like,
right. Look at Conrad, look at Erinson, look at Weah, look at
Yeah.
Hoppy, look at Joe Keeney.
Yeah.
They're all
every
guys
single one of them literally just emerged 12 months ago. So like
Right.
it's just like it's one of these things where I fully expect Busio to progress really, really well. Tessman too over the next 12 months at Venezia.
Right.
So like I'm willing to bet by the time we get to 2022 next December, we'll be fine at the 6. But that's the position for this entire season that's just kicking off last weekend. I'm watching intently. I'm like, okay, so who is going to have the best club season? Who's going to come into the national team and push for Tyler Adams' spot because we know he's going to be injured at some point. And like, that's really the only thing I'm focused on because I just don't have many other red flag warnings around this roster anymore.
No.
Yeah, and I do think there's a ton of youth to your point, Vince. Like I think there's going to be 4 or 5 guys that emerge in the next year, 18 months, that are knocking on the door, or, even guys like Brian Ko that can play, 6 or an 8, Kobe's been playing a 6 for Wolfsburg. Like there's a lot of those guys that I think could pop up pretty quickly if they have a good end of this year, start to next year.
Yeah, a lot of the scouts were really high on Moses Nyman. He's not been having the best run of form in DC, but like they were really, really high on him. So there's probably something there, and he's just, working through his teenage little slump. I mean, Busio had the exact same thing, and now he's doing fine. So like,
yeah, DC
I
United's
fully
not a great development spot either.
Nope, no. So yeah, ultimately, like we'll see some of these guys, develop over time, and I think just the same way that we've seen the roster, and we've all talked about this. This is not a golden generation. This is just the new normal. So I think if you've done what I've done and you've tracked this player pool in a spreadsheet, because I'm super nerdy, like it's just been extremely fun to just watch it fill up over time. You're like, oh, all of a sudden, like I track with like color coordinate the strength of league that these guys are playing in, and like the fact that it just went all from like 6th tier, which is where I rank MLS, to like everybody in the top positions are playing in tiers 1 through 3 now. It's just like, it's extremely cool to see. And the 6 is really the only one that you're still seeing just a ton of gray. And I think ultimately, as we start to, progress a little bit further, you're just going to see again, it's not a golden generation, it's the new normal. So at some point, there's not going to be a position that has that kind of weakness at a regulars clip anyway.
The other thing that I'm excited about is as we get these quality players, that weak link becomes more and more obvious. It's not like there's this one or two stars that rise above, but it's like we start to notice, man, that player is like completely slowing down, destroying, like they're attacking us here. And that's when it gets exciting, when it's like, if we can fill this weak link, it just brings us up as a team.
Still think one of the most exciting things, we probably won't see it in 2022, but in 2026 for sure, is the guys that'll get left off the roster. Like, I don't know, it sounds bad to say that, but it's like it's going to be a sexy roster of guys that aren't good enough to make it, aren't selected. And we've never,
and it's the normal for and it's the normal for big like soccer nations. Like Germany didn't even have a good team at this past Euros, and Leroy Sané didn't even make the team. Royce didn't go. Leroy Sané didn't make the last World Cup team. So like it's ultimately like that's just the normal, and we're about to reach that level, which is extremely exciting.
France won without Benzema.
ASM at Newcastle, man. I think he's like one of the best players in the Premier League, and he's got no shot at France. I mean, he just has no shot.
You could fill out like a bona fide Champions League contender with the players that France didn't take to these Euros.
They're under 23s.
It's just it's stupid good. Right. It's stupid good, but they're not a team, which is really funny. Like, and that's something that I think to monitor with us too. And this is why I made that point about Brendan Erinson playing the system better than Pulisic. Like, we also aren't good enough to where we're taking, even Pulisic is not good enough to where you can't play outside the system. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Berhalter kind of coaches these guys to be like, okay, you're great players, and we know that this is the most talent we've ever had. How do you meld into the system? Because that's when we're better as a collective unit.
Right. Guys will definitely be chosen over guys that might be better than them, but they don't fit the system as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, Josh Sargent, right? Like, I don't know. Is Josh Sargent a better striker than Pifak, for instance, right now? He doesn't score at a higher clip in Europe, but he's better for the system. And I don't know why more people don't admit that, because he just is. Like, Josh Sargent plays Greg Berhalter's system perfectly. So he's not getting out of that role anytime soon. He's just not.
I think that's it, guys. I don't know what else we have to say about that. That's the whole roster, right?
Yeah. It's exciting, awesome. Man. It's exciting.
Yeah, that was great. Thank all of you. I appreciate it. Let me shout all of you guys out. So Marcus is at Chasing a Cup on Twitter. Chris is Kerr C17, right?
Yep.
And Vince is USMNT _thoughts, THOUGHTS, just to be clear. He's not talking about ladies over there.